Hi guys, it's Rory here, and I'm doing another review for the Grand Prix. This time it was Italy. Uh, Mediocre race, I guess, given the recent great ones we've had, but I enjoyed it somewhat because I'm a bit nerdy like that. Obviously, one massive talking point from it. By the way, I'm playing Fuel again. Just give you something to watch while I talk. Uh, but after the race, it took about 2 hours before they decided whether or not the result would stand. So, for those who didn't see or didn't notice after the race, because I know some people, they just watch, check a flag goes down, okay, that's me, I'm done. Let's find something else to do on my Sunday. There was talk, basically 10 minutes before the race started, a scrutineer measured the tyre pressures of the front four cars, and it turned out both Mercedes were slightly below the minimum requirement, which sounds like it's a fairly minor mistake to make, but nonetheless it is technically against the rules, and the rules are there for a reason. So because of this, towards the end of the race, Mercedes suddenly realised they were going to have to go and see the stewards, and they told Lewis Hamilton to push but wouldn't tell him why. It caused a bit of panic, and nobody was really sure what was going on. But immediately after the race, it became clear that this was the case. But it took a long time to decide whether or not there was going to be any punishment and what that punishment would be. And during that time, because of the internet being the way it is and the press being the way it is, speculation ran riot. There was talk of initially people thinking a 25-second penalty, which when a race is decided by 25.04 seconds sounds a little cutting it dry and fine and perhaps a little unfair. There was talk of disqualification because that's often what happens when you breach technical regulations rather than racing ones. And then there was some talk of maybe, to be honest, I thought it sounds so minor, and they might be thinking, we want to save face somehow, that it would be some sort of slap on the wrist. But obviously that would cause upset in certain camps anyway. In the end, after these 2 hours, they didn't do anything at all, which, on the one hand, I think, yeah, good. The thing that we actually saw on television, and that was the result. One of the things I hate most about any sporting event where there's some sort of controversy like this, and you don't really get it in many team sports because they sort of go with the idea that once the final whistle's blown, that's it, the result's done, you're stuck. But in certain like in athletics and in motor racing, you get appeals and people saying, "Oh, look, he's gone over this line here," and it means that the thing that you were watching isn't actually what happened. That's not you see a guy win, you see all the trophies were handed out and everything, and then you're like, no, that wasn't the result. So I find that a little bit frustrating. Like, I get it. I've been watching it for 20 years. This is the thing that, I'm used to it by now, that these things happen. But if you're say you're someone new to the sport and you watch your race and you're like, okay, so that guy won, and they're giving him the trophy and he's celebrating and everything, and then you turn around and say, oh yeah, but before the race even started, we had a look at his tyres, and they were 0.3 psi, and I really messed that up. I'm going to have to start this race again, sorry. And they were 0.3 psi under the minimum requirement, so we're going to disqualify him. I think a lot of people would take umbrage with that. On the other hand, obviously, the regulations are there for a reason. So, I feel slightly uncomfortable about the result of the stewards' inquiry or whatever that happened after the race. Not that I think it's the wrong decision, but that I think it's an inconsistent decision to do it. Because the regulations do exist for a reason, and to be honest, as much as I play down the minor nature of it, even if it would like that, let's to clarify, they said yes, the FIA have said yes, you did breach technical regulation, yada yada yada, but we believe it to be accidental. There have been a lot of accidental situations that have, like, the stewards are punishing people all the time for accidents. You know, if you make a mistake in the pit lane, you know, if you do an unsafe release, nobody deliberately puts the car out in a dangerous way. They just make a mistake. They get penalised for that. Valtteri Bottas didn't deliberately have a mix and match set of tyres in Spa. It just happened by accident, and he got punished. And no one turned around and said, "Oh, we didn't mean it. Why are we getting punished for something we didn't mean?" If you don't conform to the rules, you get punished for them. That's just how the rules are supposed to work. Now, obviously, if you deliberately break the rules, and it's obvious that you deliberately, then you probably get punished worse. But it doesn't mean innocence requires something to not have happened. I don't buy necessarily how that a minor infraction for someone that won the, like, because a lot of people are like, oh, he won the race. When I say a lot, let's clarify it. I live in a house where I live with my dad, and my dad is a massive Lewis Hamilton fan. And when I say massive, like, he's not one of these people that has a poster on his wall and tweets with hashtag LH44 all the time, and you know, he's not that kind of person. But he'll watch a Grand Prix, and if Lewis Hamilton retires, he'll stop watching, and he'll only really care about him. And that's been the case since 2007, really. Which, you know, that's I don't mind. Like, I probably feel the same way about certain things. Yeah, I rarely watch football, and when I do, I'll only watch it if the team I want to watch is winning. Like, I'll just stop. I'll give up. So I completely understand that point of view. But I spoke to him after, and he's like, "Oh, it's a minor thing. It's not fair. He won by miles. Doesn't matter." I think if the winning margin plays, like, you can't decide how to enforce the rules based on who's winning. You can't go, well, he won by 25 seconds. This thing may have only given him about 3 seconds over the race or something, so we'll just pretend it didn't. Like, he had an illegal advantage. No matter how much difference it made. You know, if you cheat but you didn't need to cheat, you still cheated. That should be how the rules operate. And I'm pretty sure that is how the rules operate. And so I don't buy that argument. And I think the telling point was, I asked my dad very clearly, is if the car that had happened to this happened to be one of the red ones, how would you feel? And he just, like, sort of a knee-jerk reaction, said, "Yeah, but they always get away with it." Which suggests to me that the defense for Mercedes is, why would they do this? And they're winning anyway. So, and they don't have a history of this. They do have a slight history. They already got away with the silly fake pit stop earlier in the year. I don't think that they were necessarily doing something malicious. I think they've clearly been able to prove they weren't doing something malicious. But I do think they have a certain level of strategic incompetence, which may mean that this sort of thing can happen. And perhaps if it was checked every week, they would have been guilty of it every week. And the last thing I'm going to say on this before I move on, because I'm sure it's getting boring now, is just how minor again, this having your tyre deflated slightly. You got to remember is that Formula 1 is a thing. It is an event which a lap around Monza is 74 seconds or something, and maybe 84 seconds or so. And the pole is often decided. Now, I know this wasn't for pole, this was for the race, but the cars are often separated by maybe a tenth of a second. So we're talking about almost a thousandth of a lap is considered a decent advantage. So if we're talking about a 0.1% gain being a significant thing, then 0.3 psi on a tyre that's 20 psi, that's a fairly significant gap. Now obviously there's something that wouldn't really give them that much more performance, but a less deflated tyre would offer more mechanical grip, and it would potentially be less likely to puncture, which after last race that might be something they're trying to avoid. So I think there is an advantage, even if it's only tiny. There is a potential advantage to the situation that unravelled, and so I would lean towards saying give them a punishment. I wouldn't necessarily disqualify them, because I think that would be grossly unfair and send the wrong message. But I think some sort of punishment would have to be given out. And unfortunately, if it happened to be that disqualification was the only option in that situation, then you just have to disqualify them, because that's the rules. There's plenty of other people have been disqualified from races they've won before. It's not a new thing. But anyway, I think that's enough on that. Let's actually get down to the race itself. So, it's a sad indictment of how Formula 1 is, that so often it's let's get back to the race itself. And I'm doing a terrible time racing this. Anyway. So, it was a fairly standard victory for Lewis Hamilton, other than the tyre situation. He was on pole, he got a decent enough getaway. The man directly next to him, Kimi Räikkönen, had a horror show, which we'll get to in a minute. And he held off Vettel into the first corner. And pretty much once you're out the first corner of a race, you have the fastest car. And there's only going to be one stop, so there's not even that room to strategically pressure you in other ways. He was very unlikely to ever lose the race. Like, you put the fastest car at the front of the grid, and it drives. All it's going to do is get further away from the one behind it. So a clean race is all you need to win from there, and he did that. Well done to him. That's how racing works. Who didn't have a clean race was the man in second. Kimi Räikkönen basically didn't move off the start line. It was the worst start I've ever seen by someone without them crashing, basically. By the time he got to the first corner, he was stone dead last, from second on the grid. The fact that he managed to work his way through the field and finish fifth... No, he finished fifth? Yeah, he finished fifth in the end. Is both a... He did a decent race. You can't do that without having a decent race. But it's an increasingly common sight in Formula 1. And the reason for this is the cars are quite far apart. It's not like 2009 where anybody could be knocked out of qualifying at any time because the grid is separated by half a second from first to 20th in London. This is a very spread out grid. So you put... And that Ferrari clearly was the second fastest car, and it was faster than one of the other Mercedes anyway. So for him to pass the others is fairly standard. And if you look at it, who's he got in front of him? Hamilton and Vettel. So the two the guy that was faster than him and the guy in the same car as him, and the two Williams who are fairly fast. Also, so he passed every car that is and also ran, but didn't manage to get past the actual front end of the grid, which I think, to be honest, is how these races. Like, you remember back to Hungary. Now I know Hamilton in the end had an accident or a puncture, one of those sort of catastrophic things. But he went from stone dead last to about third or fourth, because when you're in the fastest car and everybody behind you is pretty slow, getting through the field is not hard. Like, it's just not a difficult thing to do because you've got such overspeed. So I don't like. Raikkonen did fine because he didn't smash it out fifth, last to fifth. You know, it's a decent recovery, but I don't think he necessarily did more than anybody else would have done in that situation, because it's just that it was simply too easy. Sebastian Vettel had a very boring afternoon in second. It was one of those ones, and I'm having a terrible time on this game, by the way. It was one of those afternoons where, you know, he got a clean start, but he couldn't get in front of Hamilton, and once the guy in front of you has a faster car and isn't making a mistake, and nobody behind you is particularly challenging, there's very little he could do to even turn up on the television. And he seemed very happy with second, because I think being a Ferrari driver at Monza means something to a lot of people. And, you know, there's nothing again, it's a sad state when the grid is quite spread out, but on a one-stop race, there is nothing that Vettel could do to upset Hamilton's rhythm. And that's the only way that Hamilton's lost races this year, when his rhythm has been upset. Like, if you can either, you know, if you take a two-stop when it's a one-stop race, you can sort of get out in front and give them something to chase and put a bit of pressure on. Or if you go one-stop and it's a two-stop when it's supposed to be a two-stop race, like Vettel tried to do in Spa, you can sort of stretch things out. You have to apply some sort of scoreboard pressure to Lewis Hamilton this season. That's the only way he can be beaten, and Monza is not a place to do that. Further down the grid, you know, Felipe Massa, very nice seeing in third, but again, there's, you know, he wouldn't have been third, which I should probably cover. Nico Rosberg's car went up in flames. He had a terrible start. He was in fourth in the first place, which is terrible for him this year. But he worked it back, got past both Williams, and then his car just went poof, which is not good. I think his championship's over now, which is a terrible thing to say, given how many races we have left. But he's more than 2 race wins behind his teammate. I can't see how anybody... I can't see how Hamilton's going to lose that many points without something absolutely disastrous happening. And Mercedes don't look like they're going to have a disaster unless they get in trouble with the stewards over and over again. But with Williams, you know, I'm happy to see Massa on podium. I really like Felipe Massa as a person. His driving is so-so, but Williams didn't challenge, and it's a common theme with them is that they sort of fail to put a challenge in when they appear to have the pace to do so. Maybe Monza is not a great place because tactically there's not very much you can do, but it's disappointing. The Red Bulls did what the Red Bulls were always going to do, which is when you're at the back of the grid, zoom through and score decent points. I'm trying to think if there's really anything else worth covering. Shame for Lotus, both cars out in the first lap. McLaren had a McLaren weekend. 2015 for McLaren has just been miserable. I'm not even sure if they should. It's almost not worth trying anymore. It's a horrible state of affairs. Every time they look like they're moving forward slightly, something else terrible happens. So yeah, really, like, it wasn't the greatest race in the world. It may have ended the championship, which is a strange thing to say this early in the year. But you know, there's a lot of running themes and things that I think the sport has to address. I just don't think that this steward situation where you take 2 hours to decide and then what your decision is well, they didn't really mean it, so we'll let them off. That just doesn't seem right. Like, they should say something earlier than that if that's what they're gonna. But that's, you know, that's just me. I reckon I'm gonna call it a day because I think I've covered everything, and this racing malarkey is not going well for me. So I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.